Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of Ain't That Something? All right, my friends. So, if this is your first time tuning in, welcome. I am your host, Eve, and I appreciate you tuning in with us this evening. Tonight, we are going to talk about being good parents. Just be a good parent, okay? I say this because if you all know, if you don't know, I am, you know, with the education background, with the mental health professional background as well. And we're coming to the close of the summer, and children are getting ready to come back to school. And as a person of knowledge with education and just what that looks like, I can tell you right now, when those kids come back to school in August, you know the ones that there was some structure, there was some, activities put in place, there were some routines that were put in place over the summer break. And it shows when those that were not, those that were left alone for hours of the day, no structure, no supervision, no one to really reinforce any type of learning, any type of reading. So once they come back to school, it's like we just left off from your child having the same struggles that they had the previous year. And so this topic is very near and dear to me because of one, all of this conversation that's been going on about what the new music is and, things that have been influencing kids. And I always say that it ties back to the parent because the parent is the first teacher. Regardless if you're going to, want to believe that or not. But if you are a mother and a father, or if you're a single mother, your obligated job is to teach your child and prepare them for what they are going to experience outside of your home. So if you are in your home and you feel as though your child is fine, it doesn't bother you what they're doing, it doesn't bother you that they talk back to you or they don't pick up their room or have any chores, that's wonderful. But please keep in mind that when they go to school, there's going to be structures put in place from the time they start school at 8 in the morning or 7:30 in the morning until 3 p.m. or 4 p.m. So if you didn't have anything like that, even if it's a flexible, loose schedule over the summer, don't be mad at the teachers when they're calling you and letting you know what your child is doing. Because we're not their parent, and the school is not their home. So what is okay at your home is not going to be okay at school. And let's remind those parents that your child is not the only child in their classroom. There can be up to 25 children plus some. And so those educators and those teachers that are dedicated to ensuring that your children are receiving, a solid education and a safe environment deserve parents to be a little bit more proactive when it comes to planning and preparing your children for coming back to school and throughout the school year. And I wanted to discuss this because, like I said, there's so much blame pushed on, it's the music that they listening to. It's the technology. They always got their face in a screen. It's always blame after blame after blame on irrelevant things that children wouldn't necessarily have access to if their parents put some governance over that. That's on the parent. Let me give you an example. You have parents who have children that are in grade levels, pre-K all the way to 6th grade. And the child has to come to school, understand how to walk in lines, how to wait turns, how to balance transitioning from one classroom to the gym that's halfway across the school, back to their class, learning, one subject, then transition to another subject. Also, getting along with others and having social skills, being able to regulate their emotions. And so when they're in school, which they're spending majority of the day and week with the teacher and with all of the educators in the school, the least the parents can do is reinforce, support, and try to understand. Now, you may have some parents that look down on teachers like, oh, that you picked that job, but I'm going to tell you this. Being in education and teaching children and exposing them to a world of learning is nothing to look down upon, okay? Especially if their parents aren't exposing them to anything, okay? So those parents that will look down at and try to make it seem as though those teachers are coming after your kid or have a problem with your child because you don't want to hear the truth, you need to take a second look, okay? Because this is what I often have to say. If you are not setting your child up to understand that when they're in school, there are rules to be followed, there is authority to respect. As your child continues to develop year after year, they are getting conditioned. If you are not enforcing anything, you are conditioning them that they are entitled to go as they please, do what they want, and nothing is going to happen to them. Now, in my years of education, I have worked literally in all levels, from elementary, middle, and up. And I can tell you the most challenging and sad sector of education is elementary, because you have so many parents that see their children as their babies and ultimately stunt their growth and development because they don't want anybody to tell their children anything. They don't want anyone to reprimand or discipline their children unless they want to do it themselves. But the thing about it, parents, is that you're not in the classroom with your child. You don't see what your child is doing when they're not at home with you. And they may be perfect angels with you, but I question that because I've seen the children in public with their parents that have, behavior issues and such. And it doesn't seem as though those parents would really actually have a bit of control, or those children are listening to them. So that's why I stress and emphasize that it starts with the parents. If you're not consistent and you don't have any structure in place, you've never introduced your child to discipline. Discipline is not always spanking, okay? Discipline is, hey, you did this, here's the consequence. And that consequence can be anything that is going to make that child understand, I lost a privilege. I lost something because I did something. But if you don't do that, when they get to school and that teacher tries to put in place a behavior chart or rules of their classroom or outline what the expectations are, because you have never exposed that to them, they're going to be the number one they're going to be the number one bad boy or bad girl. Okay? And so I had to get on here and talk about this because there's just too many ongoing cases. And I am not going to say that it's getting worse, because I believe that 13 years ago, it was just as bad. And we go through waves in education that, some years seem a little more challenging than others, based on whatever is happening politically or what our society is going through. But all in all, it's all the same. And it really boils down to, what is the mindset of the parent? And what do you want your children to grow up to understand? I've seen situations where we have communicated to a parent all through the school year the challenges, behavior challenges that their child is showing constantly. And no matter what is put in place, the child continues to do what they're doing. The parents will deny wanting to get any testing. They will deny any resources. Or the child may have all of those resources, and the parent will still place blame on something else. They'll blame the other children. They will blame the teacher. And what's so interesting is that when those children move on from an elementary level, or they go on to middle school, everything that was presented to those parents to prevent them from continuing these behaviors, because the parent didn't do they didn't listen, now that child moves up to the higher grades and then ultimately high school, and now those behaviors have grown exponentially with that child. And I often wonder if those parents ever think back and say, man, that third grade teacher in AP, or that third grade counselor was trying to tell them something, trying to let me know, trying to get some things in place. I really often wonder that, because I think sometimes parents feel like, well, shoot, kids are going to be kids, they're going to grow out of it. But I beg to differ, because children continue to grow and get better at the behavior, whether it's good or not so good. They continue to develop with those mindsets. And if those parents are not active in setting something up to prevent it, you have the most problems, and then once that child is in high school and they're not engaged in or not involved in school or doing anything positive, because there's something else going there, there's something else deeper within that child is dealing with, now the parents tend to shift and be upset with the child. But it's not the child's fault. That's what I want to get at. This has nothing to do with the children. It has everything to do with the parents. And when we look at the parent, Now we have to look at where they came from. Who was parenting you? Okay, did you come from a lineage of dysfunction? And so that's all you know is dysfunction. So now your children are functioning in dysfunction. Somebody has to end it. Somebody has to wake up and say, enough is enough. Like, we can't continue this cycle. Because that's all that happens, until there's one. It only takes one child to be like, I'm not going to do this. And I speak from experience on that. Because when I look back at everything that I learned about my family, oh my God, I was like, no wonder everybody is what they are. If we as adults do not recognize the mistakes of those before us, and we continue to make those mistakes, and you know that you can recognize the mistakes that were done to you. If you are my age now, if you in your 30s and 40s, you definitely can look back at what your parents did and did not do and make a sound decision that you will not do the same thing that they did. It's that simple. But if you are caught up in, well, this is all I know and I'm going to be real, and okay, well, then nothing is going to change. The cycle is going to continue. We have to not only break the cycles of behavior, we have to break the cycles of trauma. I know majority of my friends and family who grew up, and we all have a story of getting beat with something, a shoe, a belt, a floor mat, a dish rack. We have all types of traumatic, violent stories. Did that shape us into being sound individuals? And did those experiences break us down to the point? Not everybody, no. But at the end of the day, children who experience trauma, when they become adults, because that's what they was exposed to and that's what they were conditioned to, they tend to gravitate to more traumatic experiences, right? If you are a parent who went through something traumatic and you got counseling or support for that, but you don't encourage your children to get counseling, or you didn't expose your children to counseling and therapy when they were younger to get through the trauma that they experienced, they are 100% going to experience trauma in their adult life. That's what's going to happen, because they don't know how to cope with it. You may know how to cope with it, right? You went through the process, but your child and your children, they needed to go through that process as well, in order for them to be able to recognize the difference in trauma and love. Because sometimes when we're going through trauma, when our parents were inflicting trauma, what did they say? I beat you because I love you. I do this because I love you. I was a child, and that would just make me so mad, because I was like, what kind of love is this? Now, of course, I didn't say it because I didn't want to get slapped in the mouth. But honestly, what kind of love hurts or beats you down and tells you, I do this because I love you? I never understood that. And as a parent myself, I've never said anything related to trauma to my child and said this was love. Because why? That's confusing. Because whenever that child gets into a relationship and someone is mistreating them or putting them down or talking to them crazy, what are they going to subconsciously think of? Oh, this is what love is. Because they must be saying this to me because they love me. They must be saying this to me because they want me to do better. No, we need to change our mindset. I'm not a fan of the gentle parenting, and I'm definitely doing the air quotes. I'm not a fan of gentle parenting because I don't find that as like truly realistic, especially the way that it is portrayed. I think gentle parenting is capable if you have systems in place where, your child understands the level, right? My gentle parenting is I'm always going to be available for my child to talk to and communicate. And I'm always going to, provide clear communication to my child and allow them to express themselves. However, my child will always know that there's consequences for negative behaviors and consequences for positive behaviors. They'll know the difference. And when there is a behavior that yields a negative consequence, I'm going to explain to them, this is why you don't do this, this, and this, because this happens. But the consequence is going to go to play. Am I saying completely delete spanking or not hit your child? I'm not saying that, but I am saying have it as the last resort. I don't believe in spanking a child over really 6 years old. By 6 years old, that kid should already know what the expectation is. They should already be able to express using their words whatever it is that they need, how they feel, what they want. And if they can do that at that time, then there's no need for me to go get a belt to whoop on you. I shouldn't be whooping on you at 10 and 12, 11, 13. What? I'm not going to do that. That's so weird. To me, that's trauma. Okay? But what I can do when you are at those ages, you're going to lose something. You're going to lose a privilege. You're going to have a conversation with me. And I'm going to make sure you understand. But hear me out. Sometimes people think that once the child is 10 years old, 11 years old, that now they just figured it all out. They know better. They don't know nothing. They've only been on the earth 10 years. What do they know? And 5 of those 10 years, they were a baby. So a 10-year-old is not going to be able to logically reason anything without explanation, without repetition, without, a parent being consistent with them. If you don't have that in place, by the time that child is 10 years old, I'm not saying it's too late, but you definitely going to have a hard time. There's an old saying, and I might mess this up. It's easier to bend a young branch or a little limber like twig, right? But once that limb is a whole branch, like what, you're not going to break it? If you wait until that child is 14 and 15 to try to put in some, you need to clean your room. You need to do your own laundry now. and they've never had any kind of structure, good luck. If they've been talking back to you since they were 3 years old because you thought it was cute, and now they're talking back to the teachers and they're 11 and they're talking back to you and they're using curse words, they've had 11, 12 years to perfect that. So it's going to take you just that amount of time to reverse it. I don't want to preach to y'all, but I'm just saying. School is about to start. School is about to start, and educators need parents' help. Okay? Parents need to take accountability on raising your children, teaching your child accountability. Okay? We all seen what the little girl did on the Netflix special. All through school, no accountability. Parents sitting up here talking about, I can tell when she's lying. Do you know how many times I've heard parents say, oh, I know my child, they wouldn't do that. Okay, you keep with that mindset, because as you're doing that and you are reinforcing that thought to that child is looking at you and being like, oh, she real dumb. She really don't, I can get away with this. And that's the honest truth. That's coming from my experience with education to your ears. If you have a child, it's not too late. If they're older, it's not too late. It's just going to be harder. And it's going to be a rearranging and a restructuring. But if you're not capable of being consistent, well, the consequences of that is going to happen. I've said this before in my other conversations about this. We as parents, we as the new adults, have the power and the ability now to do something different that our parents didn't do for us. And so it's up to us if we want to see a change in the children and how they behave and the next generations to come. But if we're sitting back and just letting it be what it's being, it's not going to be any different. And that's why I say it doesn't matter what music is being played, what video games, what technology has done. Because if you are the parent and you are not taking that responsibility, the kids are going to always gravitate to what's negative. And the consequences are going to be dire. We just had a report of 2 young girls. They will not be going to school. Their lives are gone. Because they're hanging with an adult. I don't know if it was a parent, cousin, auntie, but they're hanging with an adult that's putting them in situations that are criminal. And you got everybody in an uproar being like, oh, but those are kids. It's like, please, miss me with it. At the end of the day, they thought they were going to get away with it. And if they would have got away with it, they would have did it again. And again, and again, until they got caught. So, be better parents. Come on. It starts at home. Not at school, at home. So, join in the conversation. If you would like to chime in, please send me an email, a DM. You can follow me on Instagram. All you got to do is look for Ain't That Something to Listen To. And those are number 2s, okay? Join in the conversation because we got a real problem. And it's not about the kids. It's about the parents of the kids. It starts there. So until next time, y'all, ain't that something?